The warm spring sun shone down on the bustling streets of downtown as the annual city festival came to life. Colorful banners hung between lampposts, and the smell of grilled food filled the air. Staff Sergeant James Cooper walked through the festival entrance, his military haircut and straight posture making him stand out from the relaxed crowd around him. Cooper had just returned home 3 weeks ago from his third deployment in Afghanistan. At 32 years old, his face showed the experience of someone who had seen too much too soon. But today, he wanted to enjoy some normal civilian life. He wore simple clothes, blue jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and comfortable boots. The only hint of his military background was the Special Forces pin on his baseball cap. The festival was bigger than he remembered from his childhood. Rows of food stalls lined both sides of Main Street, selling everything from hot dogs to Thai food. Children ran between the carnival games, carrying stuffed animals and cotton candy. Music played from several directions, mixing with the happy sounds of people enjoying their Saturday afternoon. Cooper stopped at a coffee stand and bought a large black coffee. The young woman working there gave him a friendly smile and refused to take his money when she noticed his military pin. He thanked her but still put a $5 bill in the tip jar. That's when he first noticed the bikers. 6 motorcycles rumbled down the street, their engines too loud for the family event. They parked their bikes right on the sidewalk, forcing people to walk around them. Cooper counted 8 men in leather vests, all wearing patches that read Street Kings MC. They looked out of place among the festival families. As Cooper found a bench to sit on, he watched the bikers split into 2 groups. 3 of them headed toward the beer garden, while the other 5 started walking through the food stalls. Something about their body language made Cooper uneasy. He developed a good sense for trouble during his years in Special Forces, and these men weren't here to enjoy the festival. An elderly couple caught Cooper's attention. They were working hard at their food stall, serving homemade tamales from old family recipes. Their sign read, Martinez Family Tamales, 25 years at City Festival. The old man moved slowly, but carefully as he worked the grill, while his wife took orders with a warm smile that made everyone feel welcome. Cooper noticed how the 5 bikers stopped near the tamal stand, pretending to look at the menu. But they weren't interested in food. Their eyes moved between the cash box and Mrs. Martinez, who was alone at the front counter while her husband worked in the back. The biggest biker, wearing a vest with "Snake" written on it, nudged his friends and grinned. The festival crowd continued to move around them, unaware of the tension building. Parents guided their children past the bikers, some walking faster when they noticed the rough-looking group. A young security guard noticed them too, but seemed unsure what to do. He spoke quietly into his radio and kept his distance. Cooper set his coffee down and adjusted his position on the bench. He didn't want trouble. He'd seen enough of that overseas. But he also knew that good men can't just watch bad things happen. His Special Forces training had taught him to spot danger before it started, and every instinct told him these bikers were about to cause problems. Mrs. Martinez was counting change for a customer when Snake and his friends moved closer to her stand. Cooper watched them carefully, remembering his team surgeon's words. Stay alert, stay alive. Even at a peaceful festival in his hometown, those words still felt important. The bikers were getting ready to make their move, and Cooper knew this pleasant spring afternoon was about to change. Snake and his 4 friends surrounded the Martinez family tamal stand. The biker leader planted both hands on the counter, making Mrs. Martinez step back. His leather vest had patches showing he was the Street King's president, and old scars on his arms suggested he'd been in many fights. Hey, Grandma, Snake said loudly, how about some free samples for me and my boys? His breath smelled of cheap beer, and a snake tattoo crawled up his neck. The other bikers spread out, blocking customers from approaching the stand. Mrs. Martinez tried to stay polite, though her hands shook slightly. I'm sorry, sir, but we don't give free samples. Our tamales are very affordable, though. Only $3 each. Snake's fake smile disappeared. He leaned closer over the counter. Maybe you didn't hear me right. We're not asking. He knocked over a stack of paper plates, sending them flying. It would be a shame if something happened to your nice little setup here. Mr. Martinez came from the back of the stand when he heard the commotion. Despite his age, he stood tall and faced the bikers. Please leave our stand. We don't want any trouble. Trouble? Snake laughed, and his friends joined in. Trouble's already here, old man. He reached over and grabbed Mrs. Martinez's arm, making her cry out in fear. From his bench 20 feet away, Cooper watched everything unfold. He saw how Snake's friends kept looking around, making sure no police were nearby. He noticed how they had positioned themselves to block anyone from helping. These weren't just random troublemakers. They had done this before. Cooper stood up slowly. His coffee sat forgotten on the bench as he walked toward the tamal stand. People moved out of his way, sensing something was about to happen. Some took out their phones to record, but no one stepped in to help. "You got 3 seconds to let go of the lady's arm," Cooper said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the authority of someone used to giving orders in dangerous situations. Snake turned around, surprised that anyone would dare interrupt him. He kept his grip on Mrs. Martinez's arm as he looked Cooper up and down. "Mind your own business, Boy Scout. This is between us and the old folks." Cooper took another step forward. His movements were calm but purposeful. "I'm making it my business. Last chance to walk away before this gets uncomfortable." His eyes stayed locked on Snake, but he was aware of every biker's position. The smallest biker, a nervous-looking young man with a patchy beard, tugged at Snake's vest. "Come on, boss. Let's just go. There's other stands." But Snake couldn't back down in front of his gang. He shoved Mrs. Martinez away roughly and turned to face Cooper. "You got no idea who you're messing with, friend." He cracked his knuckles and grinned at his friends. "Looks like we need to teach someone some manners." Cooper didn't move. His military training had taught him to stay still before a fight, to save energy and let the enemy make the first mistake. He noticed how 2 of the younger bikers stepped back, already unsure about fighting him. The crowd around them grew larger as people sensed a fight coming. The young security guard was talking frantically into his radio, but he stayed at the edge of the crowd. Festival music played in the background, creating a strange contrast to the tense situation. Snake took a step toward Cooper, trying to use his height advantage to look intimidating. "Last chance to walk away, tough guy." His right hand moved toward the chain hanging from his belt. Cooper's voice remained steady. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you." His stance shifted slightly, a movement so small most people wouldn't notice, but it put him in perfect position to react to any attack. Snake made his first big mistake. He shoved Cooper hard in the chest, expecting him to stumble backward. Instead, Cooper didn't move an inch. It was like pushing against a brick wall. The crowd gasped, and phones recorded everything. "That was a bad decision," Cooper said calmly. His military training kicked in automatically. He noticed everything: how Snake's right foot was too far forward, how the bigger biker on the left was reaching for something in his pocket, how the 2 youngest ones were backing away even further. Snake's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. Nobody made him look weak in front of his gang. He swung a wild punch at Cooper's face, putting all his weight behind it, but Cooper wasn't there anymore. He had shifted just 3 inches to the left, making Snake's fist hit empty air. The momentum of his missed punch made Snake stumble forward. Cooper helped him along with a gentle push, and suddenly the big biker leader found himself falling into his own friends. They caught him, but now they looked worried. This wasn't going how they expected. "You're making this worse than it needs to be," Cooper told them. His voice remained steady, the same voice he had used to calm scared civilians in war zones. "Just walk away. The police are already on their way." He could hear sirens in the distance. But Snake wasn't done. He pulled out his chain and wrapped it around his fist. "Get him," he yelled to his gang. The 2 older bikers moved forward while the younger ones disappeared into the crowd. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez huddled together behind their counter, watching in fear. The bigger biker, wearing a vest that said Crusher, pulled out brass knuckles. His friend, a skinny man with a long beard, grabbed a heavy wrench from his back pocket. They tried to circle around Cooper, thinking they could trap him between them. Cooper didn't look worried. His special forces training had prepared him for much worse situations than this. He kept his hands relaxed at his sides, shifting his weight slightly as the bikers moved. The festival crowd had formed a large circle around them, everyone holding their breath. "Last warning," Cooper said. "Drop the weapons, or this ends badly for you." He spoke like someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Snake responded by swinging his chain. The chain whistled through the air where Cooper's head had been a split second before. Cooper moved like water, flowing around the attack. In the same smooth motion, he grabbed Snake's chain-wrapped hand and used the biker's own momentum to send him crashing into Crusher. The skinny biker with the wrench rushed forward, swinging wildly. Cooper caught his arm, twisted just enough to make him drop the wrench, and pushed him gently but firmly away. The biker stumbled backward and fell over a trash can. Crusher got up and charged like an angry bull, brass knuckles ready to strike. Cooper stepped aside at the last second, stuck out his foot, and helped Crusher's charge carry him straight into a nearby empty food cart. The cart rolled away with the big biker tangled in it. Snake was the only one left standing now. He looked different. The confidence was gone from his face. He still held his chain, but his hands were shaking slightly. The crowd watched silently, phones recording every moment. "Are we done here?" Cooper asked quietly. He hadn't even broken a sweat. His stance was still perfectly balanced, ready for anything. "Or do you need another lesson?" The other bikers were slowly getting up, groaning and holding various parts of their bodies. None of them seemed eager to continue the fight. Even Snake could see this was a battle he couldn't win. Cooper stood in the center of the chaos he had created. 3 bikers were slowly picking themselves up from the ground, and Snake still held his chain but kept his distance now. The crowd watched silently, dozens of phones recording everything. "Let me explain something," Cooper said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet festival grounds. "I've spent the last 10 years in places where mistakes get people killed. I've trained to handle threats a lot worse than a few bikers with chains." He took one step toward Snake, making the biker leader step back. The young security guard had finally pushed through the crowd. He held his radio with shaking hands but stayed back when he saw how Cooper controlled the situation. Police sirens were getting closer, but they were still a few minutes away. "Right now, you have 2 choices," Cooper continued, speaking to all the bikers. "First choice, you drop the weapons, get on your bikes, and leave. You never come back to this festival, and you never bother these vendors again." He gestured toward the Martinez family, who watched from behind their counter. Crusher, the big biker, had untangled himself from the food cart. His brass knuckles were gone, probably lost during his fall. He looked at Snake, waiting for a signal about what to do next. The skinny biker with the wrench was already backing away toward their motorcycles. "What's the second choice?" Snake asked, trying to sound tough despite his obvious fear. His chain had left red marks on his own hand from gripping it too tight. Cooper's eyes hardened. "Second choice, you try to continue this fight. Based on what I've seen, it ends with all of you in the hospital, then jail." He didn't raise his voice, but everyone heard the steel in his words. "And if you think what just happened was bad, remember, I was being gentle," the crowd murmured. Someone in the back shouted, "Listen to him, Snake." It was one of the younger bikers who had run away earlier. "This guy's not playing around." Mrs. Martinez had found her courage. She stepped out from behind the counter and pointed at Snake. "We have all of this on video now. The police will see everything you did." Cooper nodded. "She's right. Those sirens are getting closer. Time to make your choice." He shifted his weight slightly, and all the bikers flinched. "I'm really hoping you're smart enough to pick option 1. Snake looked at his fallen friends, then at the crowd of witnesses with their phones, and finally at Cooper's steady gaze. The soldier hadn't even taken a fighting stance. He stood relaxed, hands open at his sides. But something in those eyes told Snake this was a fight he couldn't win. "This isn't over," Snake muttered, but his heart wasn't in it. He dropped the chain, letting it clatter on the pavement. "Let's go," he called to his gang. They started backing away toward their motorcycles, helping each other walk. Just as everyone thought the situation was over, Snake stopped halfway to his motorcycle. His face twisted with rage as he heard people in the crowd laughing at him. 10 years as the Street King's leader, and now he was running away in front of everyone. His pride wouldn't let him accept that. "Nobody makes me look weak," Snake shouted. He pulled out a switchblade from his boot and clicked it open. "Crusher, Razor, Devil, get back here." The 3 bikers turned around, and something in Snake's voice made them obey despite their better judgment. Cooper sighed quietly. He had seen that look before, the desperate anger of someone who would rather fight than lose face. "The smart choice was right there," he said, mostly to himself. "But they never take it." The 4 bikers spread out in a half-circle around Cooper. Snake with his knife, Crusher still looking dazed but angry, Razor pulling out brass knuckles, and Devil producing another chain. The crowd backed up further, some people running to get their children away from the scene. You think you're tough because you know some fancy moves? Snake snarled. His knife glinted in the afternoon sun. Let's see how tough you are against all of us at once. Cooper's whole demeanor changed. The casual stance disappeared, replaced by something more focused, more dangerous. His eyes swept across all four bikers, calculating distances and angles. The soldier who had seen real combat was now fully present. Last time I was surrounded like this, Cooper said quietly, it was by Taliban fighters in Kandahar. They didn't walk away either. His voice carried a warning that made several people in the crowd shiver. Snake lunged forward with his knife while Crusher and Devil came in from the sides. Razor tried to circle behind Cooper, thinking they had him trapped. The crowd gasped as all four attackers converged at once. But Cooper was already moving. His Special Forces training had prepared him for exactly this kind of situation, multiple armed opponents attacking simultaneously. Time seemed to slow down for him as muscle memory and combat experience took over. The festival's cheerful music played in strange contrast to the violence about to unfold. Mrs. Martinez had her hands over her mouth, watching in horror. Her husband held her close, both of them too scared to look away. The young security guard was frozen in place, his radio forgotten in his hand. Remember? Cooper said, his voice deadly calm as the bikers closed in. You chose this? His hands came up into a ready position, and his feet shifted slightly on the pavement. Every movement was precise, measured, deliberate. The next few seconds would become legendary in the city's history, shared on social media thousands of times. 4 armed bikers against 1 soldier. But looking at Cooper's face, some people in the crowd already knew who was really outnumbered. What happened next was almost too fast for the crowd to follow. Snake's knife slashed through empty air as Cooper stepped inside his reach. In one fluid motion, Cooper gripped Snake's knife hand and twisted. The blade clattered to the ground, followed by Snake himself as Cooper used the biker's momentum to flip him over. Crusher charged in with a roar, but Cooper was already moving. He redirected Crusher's punch, making the big biker stumble past him. As Crusher tried to turn around, Cooper delivered 2 precise strikes, one to the solar plexus, another to the knee. Crusher went down hard, gasping for air. Devil's chain whistled through the air, but Cooper had already calculated its arc. He caught the chain mid-swing, wrapped it around his forearm, and yanked. Devil, not expecting such strength, flew forward off his feet. Cooper stepped aside, letting the biker crash face-first into a nearby trash can. Razor, seeing his 3 friends fall in seconds, hesitated. That was his mistake. Cooper closed the distance in 2 quick steps. A series of rapid strikes, elbow, knee, palm, and Razor joined his friends on the ground. The brass knuckles fell from his limp fingers. The entire fight had lasted exactly 28 seconds. Cooper stood calmly among the fallen bikers, his breathing barely elevated. He hadn't thrown a single punch. Every move had been defensive, using the attacker's own energy against them. Stay down, Cooper advised as Snake tried to get up. You've already made enough bad decisions today. He kicked the knife away from Snake's reaching hand, sending it sliding under a festival booth. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Phones were still recording as Cooper checked each biker, making sure none were seriously injured. His military training included medical assessment, and he could tell they were mostly just bruised, physically and emotionally. Someone's going to need to give a statement to the police, Cooper said to the young security guard, who was staring with his mouth open. The guard nodded quickly and spoke into his radio, finally remembering his job. Mrs. Martinez rushed forward with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said, gripping Cooper's hand. You saved our stand, maybe our lives. Her husband nodded gratefully, still too shocked to speak. The sirens were very close now. 2 police cars pulled up to the festival entrance, lights flashing. The fallen bikers stayed on the ground, all fight gone from them. Snake looked up at Cooper with a mixture of fear and respect. What are you? Snake asked, holding his twisted arm. Cooper looked down at him. Just a soldier who's seen enough bullies. He turned to walk away, then stopped. By the way, those tamales you wanted, they're worth paying for. Best in the city. The police officers took statements from everyone at the scene, One young officer watched the cell phone videos in amazement, replaying Cooper's moves several times. The four bikers sat handcuffed near the police cars, looking defeated and embarrassed. A man in a press jacket pushed through the crowd, followed by a cameraman. Tom Martinez, Channel 5 News, he announced, holding up a microphone. "I'm actually Mrs. Martinez's grandson. I was covering the festival when I got a call about trouble at my grandparents' stand." He turned to Cooper. "Sir, would you mind telling us what happened here?" Cooper tried to step away from the camera, but the crowd encouraged him to speak. "Not much to tell," he said quietly. "Some people were causing trouble, and I helped stop it." His modesty made him even more impressive to the watching crowd. More news crews arrived, drawn by the commotion. The videos of the fight were already spreading on social media, with thousands of shares. People in the crowd started sharing their own recordings, each showing different angles of how one soldier had taken down four armed bikers without throwing a single punch. "He protected my grandparents," Tom Martinez reported into the camera. Witnesses say the bikers were threatening vendors and causing trouble before this brave veteran stepped in. The cameraman panned to show the Martinez's tamal stand, where the elderly couple was already back to serving customers, now with a long line of supporters. Detective Sarah Chen arrived to take charge of the scene. After watching the videos and interviewing witnesses, she turned to the handcuffed bikers. "We've got multiple charges here: assault, threatening behavior, weapons possession, attempted robbery. Plus, your police records aren't exactly clean." Snake stared at the ground, unable to meet anyone's eyes. His gang's reputation was ruined. Videos of them being beaten by one man would be all over the internet. The other three bikers looked equally miserable. "The soldier did you a favor," Detective Chen continued. "He could have done much worse, legally and physically. Instead, he used minimal force and gave you every chance to walk away." She shook her head. "Maybe you'll learn something from this." The festival security team had doubled in size, with off-duty police officers volunteering to help. The incident had exposed weaknesses in their security plan, and they were already making changes. The festival director announced that all vendors would now have panic buttons and direct radio contact with security. As the police cars drove away with the bikers, Cooper tried to slip away quietly, but Mrs. Martinez stopped him, pressing a large bag of tamales into his hands. "On the house," she insisted, her eyes still wet with grateful tears. "You're always welcome here." The story would make headlines. Special Forces veteran protects elderly vendors from biker gang. But Cooper didn't stay to read them. He walked home through the festival crowds, carrying his bag of tamales, glad he could still protect people who needed help. 3 months after the festival incident, the city had changed in noticeable ways. The Martinez's tamal stand had become famous, with lines stretching down the block every weekend. They had added a new item to their menu, the Soldier's Special, a spicy tamal that quickly became their bestseller. Cooper's actions had inspired other veterans in the community. Together, they formed the Veterans Community Watch, a volunteer group that helped protect local events and businesses. Many of them were Special Forces veterans like Cooper, using their training to keep the peace without violence. The Street Kings motorcycle gang had dissolved after the incident. The viral videos of their defeat had destroyed their reputation. Surprisingly, Snake had turned his life around. After serving 30 days in jail, he approached Cooper at the Veterans Center and asked for help. Now he worked security at local events, alongside the same people he once tried to intimidate. Mrs. Martinez's grandson, Tom, had won a local journalism award for his coverage of the incident. His story didn't just focus on the fight, it highlighted how one person's courage could inspire an entire community to stand up against bullying and harassment. The city council had implemented new safety measures for all public events. They worked closely with the Veterans Community Watch, creating a model program that other cities wanted to copy. Festival attendance had actually increased, with families feeling safer than ever. Cooper remained modest about his role in these changes. He continued his quiet life, helping train other veterans in defensive techniques and community service. Every Saturday, he would stop by the Martinez's stand for lunch, always insisting on paying despite their protests. One sunny afternoon, Cooper sat at his usual spot near the Martinez's stand, enjoying his tamales. A young boy approached him, holding a toy soldier. "My dad says you're a real hero," the boy said. He showed me the video. "Will you teach me how to be brave like you?" Cooper smiled and set down his food. Being brave isn't about fighting, he explained. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you're scared. Sometimes the bravest thing is walking away from a fight, but sometimes you have to protect others who can't protect themselves. The city's autumn festival was approaching, bigger than ever before. The Martinez family had expanded their business, now running 3 stands with their extended family. Their original stand still had Cooper's picture hanging proudly next to the menu, under the words "Protected by Heroes." The incident had taught the community an important lesson. One person's courage could inspire others to be better. The viral video of Cooper defending the elderly couple had over 1 million views now, but its real impact wasn't in the fight. It was in how it had brought people together to protect their community.